Hi everybody, it's Rebecca Virginia, and today I'm going to be showing you 5 Farmhouse Dollar Tree DIYs. The first DIY in today's video is a farmhouse floral sign, using a tin flower from the gardening section of the Dollar Tree as the centerpiece. Here's everything that you'll need to make it on your own. I'm starting off by taking my Dollar Tree sign. It's from Halloween time, but they make signs like this for all of the seasons and holidays, and I sanded off some of the glitter. Next, I took some of this paint, and I actually got this for free when we were looking for paint samples for our walls, and I'm just using this paint as a primer to cover up the black and orange. We'll be using some of these wood beads later in the video. I just put them in a sandwich bag and put a bit of paint in there and just kind of rolled them around in the paint. I find that this is a lot easier and faster than placing them on skewer sticks and painting them individually. With my primer dried, I placed down my bright white paint. Then I wanted to add some texture to my sign, so I took some of this really pretty burlappy ribbon that I got from the Dollar Tree. I loved the pattern of it, and I hot glued it down to each end of our wood sign. The ribbon is really pretty, but we're actually going to be painting over it. Like I said earlier, I just loved the texture of this and thought it would add a pretty cool effect to the overall sign. When I swiped my paint sponge across the ribbon, it started to fray a little bit, so I found that just dabbing the paint on worked a lot better and kept the ribbon intact. I also placed one more layer of white down onto my sign. The sign already had the edges looking like shiplap, so all that I had to do was follow what was already on the wood sign. So I took a little bit of this scrapbooking paper just to act as a guide and make sure that my lines were straight and not too curved. But when I pulled away the paper, I didn't like how crisp and perfect it looked. I wanted this to be farmhouse and kind of messy. So I more so used the scrapbooking paper as a guide, just so my lines didn't get too curved. But I didn't place it directly down again because I wanted more of a distressed look, not a perfect look. Then I continued distressing the entire sign along the top, the bottom, and a little bit on the ribbon. Some of the white spaces were a little bit too crisp too, so I just took the brush and did a dry brushing technique with whatever brown was left on the brush at the time. With the sign drying, I moved on to my tin flower. Like I said earlier, this is from the gardening section of the Dollar Tree. They have some that are on stakes, but this one in particular was a hanging sign and it had a little bell on it. That's what the hole in one of the leaves is for. And I'm just taking that same paint and using it as a primer all over just because it is such a bright color. While the paint was still the slightest bit wet, I went in with this baby blue color. And the reason why I did it while the paint was still the tiniest bit wet is because I wanted the colors to blend together and create a multi-dimensional look. I'm using these watercolor pens. They're really cool because you can fill them up with water, and whenever I would squeeze the pen, a little bit of water comes out, and I really like this when I'm trying to create an image that looks realistic and dimensional because the water just causes all of the colors to blend in really nicely together. I got these on Amazon. They came in a pack of 3. I will link them below if you're interested. I got pretty into watercolors during quarantine, so even if you don't use it for a DIY and just want to do a watercolor coloring book, these pens worked great. I finished up my tin flower by putting the little finishing touches on it, like the dark contours and making the seeds in the center of it. And I went over it all one more time with the tiniest bit of the blue paint we started with, just to blend everything together. I decided to use floral wire and beads as the hanger for this DIY. The larger wood beads are from Amazon, and the smaller beads are what we painted white earlier in the DIY, and they're actually from a children's bracelet at the Dollar Tree. I hot glued the tin flower to the center of our sign, and then once that was dried, I flipped the sign over and hot glued down our bead hanger. I wasn't sure about painting our tin flower the different shades of blue at first. I thought maybe I should go with something more neutral, but I really like how the color ended up popping against the white backdrop. Today is a super exciting video because I'm doing a Friend Friday hop that is hosted and created by Heidi Sombel. And it's super easy to participate in this hop. You're just going to click the link down below in my description box at the end of my video, and that will take you to the next person in the hop. You'll hop all the way around from channel to channel until you end up back at my video, and that's how you'll know that you have completed the hop. Now let's get back into my farmhouse DIYs. Our next DIY takes a peel and stick tile and a bottle of some iced coffee and turns it into a piece of decor. Here are some of the other items that you'll need to make this. When Dollar Tree had all of their Valentine's Day decor, 2 for $1, I picked up a couple of these signs. I then flipped it over and painted it gray. Even though the stick-on tile is going to be covering about 80% of this sign, I still wanted to do some distressing. I liked the ridges that were already in the sign, so I just used those as a guide to kind of paint on a faux shiplap look. I used black paint and a stippling brush from the Crafter's Square section of the Dollar Tree. Then I peeled off the tile from its backing and just kind of guesstimated where I thought center was. I didn't press it down yet, and I ended up having to kind of pick it up and recenter it. If you want it to be absolutely perfect, I would definitely recommend measuring this, but after eyeballing it, I thought I got it pretty well in the middle, and then I just pressed down to adhere it down to our sign. I drilled 2 holes into the center of my sign so that I could fit through a zip tie that will eventually be holding our bottle in place. And the great thing about this tile is it had these little dots outlining the center, so I just picked a dot, and that's how I was able to get it even on both sides for the bottle. I also placed the bottle down and just made sure that everything was hanging straight and even, and then once I identified the other hole that I needed to drill, I went ahead and took my drill and put it through. Once both of the holes were drilled, I took my former iced coffee bottle and placed it there, and then I just zip tied it secure in the back. This Dollar Tree iced coffee is also delicious, so not only do you get a great bottle to DIY with, but it tastes really good too. To add a little bit of definition at the top of my glass bottle, I just took some gray paint and painted all across the lid. Something that I do pretty often to add a hanger, if I'm not using jute, then I'm usually using a soda tab. So I just took one of these from my sparkling water cans and a bit of hot glue, and then I placed it on the center back of the sign, and that's going to be what holds up our sign. I really liked the monochromatic look for this sign, so I just picked 3 daisies, of course, that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I placed them down into my glass bottle. I loved the grayscale of this DIY, but I also think it'd be really beautiful if you added in some bright colors for a nice pop of spring. The next farmhouse DIY is a Hexagon floral wall decor piece. Here is everything that you'll need to recreate this DIY. The Dollar Tree currently has out these Hexagon signs. This one says welcome, and I think there's another that says family on it. And I used my spatula tool to peel off the welcome sign that I can use for a future DIY. Then I just peeled off the rest of the sign, sanded any rough edges down, and painted it with some dark brown paint. I'm going to be using tumbling tower blocks from the children's section of the Dollar Tree all around my sign. So I just grabbed some stain and a microfiber cloth, and I am just staining all of my tumbling tower wood blocks. Before hot gluing them down, I just placed them down onto my sign to map out how I wanted them to look. Then when I was satisfied with how that looked, I took my hot glue gun and individually hot glued down every single tumbling tower block all the way around the border of my Hexagon sign. To create the pocket area that my florals are going to be tucked into, I just took a piece of foam corkboard, which is found in the school supplies section at the Dollar Tree, and now I'm just tracing out a small section of it that I can place on top of my sign. At first, I was going to use a paint technique to try to make this foam corkboard look like real wood, and then I remembered that I had some wood-looking scrapbooking paper, so I just cut that out in the same shape, and then just in case any of the edges were peeking through or the florals didn't cover everything, I did go ahead and just paint the entire piece of foam core board in a dark brown paint. Again, just in case any piece of this wasn't covered by the scrapbooking paper, it wouldn't be bright white showing through and would blend in more with the background. I used a regular glue stick to adhere down the scrapbooking paper on top of our foam core board piece, and then I applied some hot glue to the outer edges of our hexagon sign and placed our foam core board piece perfectly snug into our sign, and it left about half an inch of room for me to be able to fill with some of these really pretty florals from the Dollar Tree. Pretty much whenever I'm doing a floral arrangement, I try to have a filler, which is what you see me putting in right now. Then I try to have a thriller, which is my most exciting or prettiest piece that I want to be the centerpiece, which is going to be this set of peach florals and this larger pink flower. And then I like to have a spiller. So I have some of these white florals that are going to be coming over the edge, and this longer piece of greenery that I'm going to have hanging down the entirety of our hexagon sign. And when it comes to florals, it's really all about personal preference and the types of florals and shapes that you like to see in your own home decor pieces. Another tip is I don't usually hot glue down my flowers, especially when I'm just making an arrangement like this, because I like to play with the different sizes and layering. So I try not to hot glue it down because I like to go back in and mess with it. Even when I hung this up, I went back in and started shaping up the flowers in a different way. My next DIY uses a piece of foam core board that you can find in the school supply section at the Dollar Tree and transforms it into a faux shiplap farmhouse sign. Here's what you need to make it. I used a calendar image from the Simply Blessed Dollar Tree calendars, but you could use a different calendar image or just a different image or a poster that you have. I glued it down onto my foam core board and then I cut it out using a box cutter. My calendar image that I'm using already had distressed wood lines in it, so I'm not measuring, I'm just following exactly those lines in my calendar image, and I am using this ruler just to make sure that I cut straight. Also going to need 2 extra pieces of foam core board, so I'm just using the images that I already cut out as a guide to cut out 2 more. Then I am painting those 2 foam core pieces that I just cut out completely brown and the back of our sign brown. I also took some of that dark brown paint and a stippling brush just to distress all the way around my sign to really give it that farmhouse look. Once my paint had dried, it was time to put my backing, I will call them support pieces, on the back of my sign. And I flipped them over and I had to be careful and double check because you want to make sure that you don't accidentally flip it upside down when you are doing this. And then I just eyeballed the space in between the signs. If you wanted to measure it, you definitely could. And I placed down a little bit of tape just so that my shiplap pieces wouldn't be moving around. And then I hot glued down those 2 support pieces that we had just cut out earlier out of the foam core board. And now my sign is nicely held into place. I love the look of the faux shiplap and that those 2 brown support pieces were just peeking through, but I still thought my sign needed a little something extra, so I added on some black and white gingham ribbon to the top and bottom. I'll be using jute to hang up my faux shiplap sign, but to make it a little different than the usual jute hanger, I wrapped it around the edges of that top faux shiplap or foam core board 5 times, and then I turned it into a hanger and very professionally used my scissors to hold down where I wanted it to hang. And then I wrapped around 5 times on the other side as well before securing it in place with some hot glue. I ended up doing a small burlap bow and then a double loop finger bow out of jute, and I placed that on top. I'll be showing you in the next DIY in just a moment how to do that double loop bow, but I really like the look that it added. I know it's a little bit more rustic farmhouse than traditional farmhouse, but I couldn't help but add some burlap and jute into this DIY. The last DIY in today's video is a Wildflower candle holder. Here's the supplies you need to recreate it. I'm using all Dollar Tree florals in this DIY, and I took 4 and placed them at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock, all around my glass jar. Then I went in with some shorter flowers, followed by some bits of greenery in between the spaces of the flowers. Then I had these bright purple and some white little buds that I also placed all around the glass jar. Although it's really hot glue holding up all of our flowers around the glass jar, I wanted to put some jute around the center of the glass jar so it looked like it was actually the jute holding up all of our flowers. I wrapped it around 4 times. Then I created a double loop bow with some jute. I just spread apart my index and middle finger, however wide apart that is going to determine how large or small your double bow is. Then you go over, under, and then with that little tail, you're going to go in between the V that has formed between your index and middle finger. Then after you have pulled it through the V, you're going to put it under that last little loop you had made over your middle finger and pull. There are tons of tutorials on how to make this bow on YouTube, so if I didn't explain it as easily or properly for you, you can go ahead and just YouTube search how to do a double loop bow. Then the last step was just hot gluing it on to the front of my candle and trimming off the tails. Thanks for watching my video. I'll be back next Thursday with a new DIY video for all of you. Make sure to hop on over to the channel linked down below in my description box. Until next time, keep searching, keep creating.